All right, so I'm going to go over the next assignment. That way, as your product scene is rendering out, you can start working on it or researching it or, whatever.
I'm still trying to catch up.
Mm-hmm. So our next and final project is going to be our drone. Come on. There we go. And the due date for this one will be April 30th. Yes? Yes, April 30th.
That's the assignment before the exam?
Yep. So we basically have just this assignment left. We'll have a demo reel, but that'll be like it'll take you 30 minutes to do at the most. And then we'll have a final exam, and then that'll be it for the semester. So the description of this one is we are going to be looking at more advanced hard surface modeling. Our learning objectives for this is we will work with mirroring and sectional modeling of a drone. We will also be using cloners to replicate parts. We'll be doing some basic UV manipulation. So on the product one, we had, a bit of work that we did to get it in place. This one will do a little bit more stuff. We'll be preparing this for export to bring into KeyShot. Unlike the other projects, this one will be rendered outside of Cinema because I want you to see that process of being able to take something from Cinema, prepare it, and then bring it into another software. KeyShot is not a free program. I think there is like a trial version that's watermarked. So anything in Cinema, obviously you can do that at home, but the KeyShot stuff you really want to do here so you don't have a watermark on it. Preparing for export to KeyShot, yes. And then we will be rendering an animation and still from KeyShot. Okay, there will be no planning for this one, and the turn-ins will be the essentials, which should be your final scene, textures, movie, and still. For our movie, we're going to have a 6-second movie of the drone powering up, then taking off. One of the things that people always forget, and I'll mention it again, is that when a drone powers on, it doesn't just like turn on and immediately lift off. Usually propellers have to spin for 2 seconds or so and then lift off the ground. People like to just do everything at once. It doesn't work. Our resolution for the movie will be 960 by 540 at 30 frames per second. our still will be a nice close angled still, still of the drone. And the resolution for that one will be 3000 by 2400 pixels. Which winter are we on? 2018 already. And then this one is 14 points also. 14 points possible. Cool. Anyone else need any pan up anything? Got it. Good. Save that. All right. So I'm going to start off the drone project by doing the same thing we've done before, which is copying my folder. So I have our template folder. I'm just going to copy that. Computer seems like it needs a boot or something. There you go. And then I'm going to look at, obviously, pictures of drones. Your drone does not have to match mine, but it should have some similar aspects of it, okay? You'll see that some of the drones, well, all the drones, they have to have some way to mount onto the ground. They all launch from typically you lay it on the ground, you turn it on, and then it lifts off. So it has to have some way to hit the ground without just balancing on the center beam, because that doesn't work. So in this one, you'll see that this has these little holders right here at the edges, and that's kind of that looks like what it balances on. This one has separate legs that balance right here. This one has little posts, again, that balance there. This one, I'm assuming that these things kind of turn down and then fly back up. That's kind of neat. There's another one with those. Okay, so it's going to have some sort of leg on the drone itself that will hold it up. It will also have propellers. It's best to do these in a 4 setup, okay? And it's best to do these kind of flat as well. So something like this seems like it would be cool, but because these are kind of rotated, they're actually difficult to model as rotated. You'd model them flat and then rotate them after, okay? Especially for a product like this, you want to keep it as simple as possible. So I'm going to stick with something very simple like this kind of design, all right? As I build this, I have to think of a couple of things. I can't think about just like what the thing looks like, because this is going to be animated. I have to consider what it's going to look like, but also how is it going to move. So some of these things, like how the propeller spins, that has to be a separate piece than the motor part, because the motor part stays still. The inside of it is what makes the propeller spin. So the propeller is one piece, the motor is a separate piece, and then this piece right here, this big orange piece, that's a separate piece also. If I added a camera to this, we don't have to add a camera, but you definitely could. That would be a separate piece as well. Even so far as every single one of these sides and pieces and whatever else could be a separate piece, depending on how they're moving, okay? There's also tiny details inside here. I really hate that Google got rid of that view image. But inside of these areas, you can kind of see some wires inside there. So we'll also be creating that. There's some seams right here, some like creasy areas where maybe the two plastic pieces came together. There's a little USB port here. I'm sure there's a battery pack somewhere on this thing, maybe on the other side. Well, there's the battery pack, and it's got to be on one of the sides, probably the back side that they're not showing. Okay, so I'm going to go with this kind of model as my starting point. I can tweak it after if I decide I want to tweak something, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is set up just a basic, like, what do I want this thing to look like? I could definitely start from a cube. But I think with this one, because of how it's already set up, I think starting off with a cylinder might be a better way to go. Okay, and I'll show you why. If I start with a cube, let's say I pull this down a little bit and I move that up a little bit. I want to pull out where the wings would be. Okay, so where these pieces would come out. Well, if I pull it out here, you'll see that it's going to go more like a plus sign than like an X. Okay, definitely possible. So I'm going to hit C. This is not the way that, I'm going to actually model it. So if you're following in the video, obviously you don't need to model it that way. I'm going to say preserve groups off. I'm going to pull this out. And then you'll see that I get this plus sign like this, which definitely could work because the drone would be, the other way, but it's just, I don't like it. Okay. Also, this is going to be smoothed out. So when I smooth it, you'll see that it smooths this a bit too much this way. Okay. So what I want to do is just basically start off with a better base. So using a cylinder gets me that better base. Now I shouldn't start at this point with this many divisions. This is like way too many divisions to be beginning to model this. I want to look at the shape of this. Sometimes you can find orthographic views, or you can just look up top view. And if you look at this, you'll see that it comes out here, there's a space, it comes out there, there's a space, it comes out there. So I'm going to basically build this with 8 sections. That way I'm already kind of set up to where each piece could come out. Okay, actually maybe not 8, maybe 12. Yep, I like 12. That way I can have it come out of here, come out of there, come out of there, and come out of there. Okay, that's cool. I'm going to adjust it anyway, but that should be good. I'm going to turn my caps off, so I'll build my own caps for this. And that should be a good starting point. Maybe a little bit thicker. Like that. All right. So I'm going to hit C so I can then edit the object. Now it makes more sense, because this is a symmetrical object, it makes more sense to build one corner of this and then duplicate that corner around and put everything together than try to build everything as one at one time. Okay? Basically what I mean is I don't want to build this leg at the same time building that leg and that leg and that leg. It makes more sense just to build the one corner and duplicate it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to delete everything but one corner. Okay, and because of how I set up my divisions, that's one corner right there. All right, and then I'm just going to kind of tweak this a little bit. I'm just going to move maybe this edge a bit this way, take this edge, move that a bit that way. Good. Okay. Oops, I moved that one up. I did not want to move that one up. Grab just that. There we go. Okay, so that's better. Then I'm going to grab this face and I'm going to extrude it out. And if I look at how this is set up, it actually tapers, right? So if we look at the thick part here and then this tapers down to a thinner part, I want to do that as well. So I could do that over here. Can I do that there? No, I can't do that there. I'm just going to hit T to go to my scale, and I'm just going to scale this down. And then I'm also going to raise it up. Okay, so that creates a nice clean area for this. Cool. Now what I'm going to do is I want to set it up so I can see what does it look like when I have this thing actually completed as one solid shape. So I'm going to take my cylinder here, and I'm going to, I can do a couple things. One of them I could do is I could use my cloner and clone it in a radial fashion, and that way it would get me all 4 sides. But if I don't clone it perfectly, it doesn't work the correct way. So instead of cloning it, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to use the mirror or the symmetry. Okay, so I hold down Alt, I click symmetry, and you'll see how it duplicates it to the other side. Then I'm going to go and add another symmetry to this. And I'm going to change the axis to XY. There we go. So now I have all 4 sides. And then what I'm going to do is if I smooth this out, I can see what it's going to look like as a nice smoothed object. Okay, and this way I can kind of turn off that one shape and turn it back on just to see. I can also go to my original cylinder and tweak the shape of it, and it'll tweak the shape of all of them. So that way it's going to make my job a lot easier as I'm modeling this. I don't have to worry about all four sides, I just worry about this one side. Now I do need to fill in this gap here, so I'm just going to go to this, this, and this. I'm going to right click and I will use my close polygon hole. Nope, I will not use that. What tool will get me that to be closed off? I could probably just use a bridge maybe. Yep, so bridge work there. I do want to keep everything as a quad, meaning 4 sides. Okay, so every face that I create will have 4 edges to it. I do need this to go all the way back, so I do need to have another division right here. So I'm going to go to my knife tool, line cut, and just put in a division there. And now I should have a point that I could then move back to that corner. So I'm going to turn my snap on, make sure it's set to work plane, make sure it's set to grid, and then I'll go to my top view and just snap it here. Snapping to something else. Yep, turn off vertex snapping, there we go. And now that's closed off. Now when I did that, I added the extra point. This face no longer has 4 divisions and now has 5 divisions. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 edges. So it doesn't sound like a big deal, but it is, because it'll stop us from creating a nice smooth shape. So I'm going to go to my line cut, and I'm going to cut an edge right here to right there. Okay, so now this gives me a 4-sided here, and then this one is 1, 2, 3, 4. So both of those are now 4s. Now I need to do the same thing on the bottom of this. Now what I could do is that if I'm looking at the shape of this, if this is again symmetrically vertical, right? So if I could basically cut it down the middle and clone the top and the bottom, that could be another way that I could kind of mirror this. Even though I've lifted them up here, I could definitely just adjust that, just pull that back down, and then let it mirror itself vertically as well. That'll, again, save me more time. So I need to cut it down the middle, so I'm going to go to my loop path cut. I'm going to click there, make sure this is set to 50%, and then I'm going to delete all the faces. Now anytime we're doing anything that is mirroring, all of these edges right here at the end, they have to line up. If they don't line up, then it's not going to work correctly. If this edge here is off, obviously that doesn't work. So I need to make sure that they're lined up. So I will make sure that as I'm modeling it, it stays like that. Alright, so I have my cylinder there, I have my symmetry here, my symmetry there. I'm going to go back to this first cylinder, and I'm going to add another symmetry right there. And just change the direction to X, Z. Yep, that's the one. And now that's symmetrical. If I turn this back on, I should get a nice smooth shape going all the way around it. If I don't get a smooth shape, I'm going to inspect it. I'm going to look for points that maybe are off. If I go back to the original one, I go back to my points just so you can see right there. So if I move that, you can see there's definitely an opening that needs to be closed off so that I don't get that. And I may need to turn off my subdivision, switch back to my top view, and using my grid snap to line that up. Now it's all nice and smooth. Okay, so now I'm basically ready to start modeling what I want this to look like. So the shapes of these are smooth, yet they have these sharp transitions. So looking at the top view of one of these drones, like this one, you can see that this shape is pretty smooth, but how it transitions into this is pretty sharp. This is way too soft. So I'm going to grab my points. I'm going to turn off my smooth here. And I'm just going to marquee these and maybe just push these in some. Like maybe this is just out too far. This might just be a little bit too rounded for what I need. Like that might be a better shape to start with. Yep, that's definitely better. Now, in order to hold this so it doesn't look like this is too rounded and smooth and soft, I need to put a division right about here that will hold that edge. So I'm going to use my knife loop and put one about there. In order to make sure this doesn't look too smooth, I'm going to drop one there as well. So now that's going to hold that shape better. So I still get some smoothness, but then I still get some crispness in there as well. I think I also want to add a division right here just so these two sides kind of match a little bit better. I'm also going to grab these points right there and just pull this up a little bit just to give it some rounding. I'm going to grab the face here and extrude this out. Now what we'll see is anytime I start extruding something, wherever I have symmetry extruding where symmetry is, it's actually going to create this weird little puckering. And the reason for that is that it's creating a face on the inside. So I need to make sure that after I've extruded that I go through and delete those faces on the inside. And then it'll blend very nicely together. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's go back to my drone. Alright, so this should probably come out a bit more, so I'm going to go back to my faces. Where's my cylinder at? Oops, there he is. And make sure I'm working on the right one. And I'm just going to scale this up and move that out. And now eventually there's going to be a cylinder on here. So I'm going to drop in a cylinder just as a placeholder for what this should look like. Okay, so I'm not going to use this for anything at the moment. I'm just kind of using this as a way to line up the shape. I pull that out like this. I'm going to grab the side here and the side there. I may need to want to grab just one at a time so I can move them. I'm also going to turn my snap off. Then I'll go to the other side, do the same thing. There we go. So now that platform is pretty close to where that cylinder is lined up to. Alright, now as it smooths, you'll see that it loses some of that cylinder shape just because there's not enough divisions there. So I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to go back to my knife split tool. And I'm going to add a division right down the center. So right there, I'll type in 50 so I know it's exact. That's good. I'll also add maybe a division right here. And then that gets me a little bit closer to having a perfect cylinder shape. Oops. I'm going to go to my points now and just marquee these and just bring that in. Bring that in. I'll add another loop right in the middle here. Pull this out. Pull that out. So that gives me a pretty decent looking base shape. All right, now there's some things on here I'm not going to want to model as a symmetrical object. The little dip that's right in here is probably not on the bottom. Okay, the bottom is probably just flat. Here, there's a dip where that motor is sitting, so I don't want to model a dip in the bottom of this. So at some point, I'm going to have to cut it off. Also, the top of this one is pretty rounded, where down here it's pretty like square and blocky. So I want to make sure that I include both of those as separate pieces or as separate shapes. So I'm not going to do that yet. There is a nice seam that seems to go down the middle of this. So I do want to incorporate that in there as well. Now that seam I'm not going to be able to do again as a symmetrical object. So what I'm going to do is, let me pull this out so maybe you can see it better. I have this cylinder right here, and I added it to this symmetry so that I have basically this shape. Okay? So I'm going to take that shape and hit C on it so that it actually bakes it into one shape. So now this is like a locked in shape that's one piece. If I smooth it, I can verify that everything is connected together. In earlier versions of Cinema, what would happen is these little edges here, even though they were touching, when I symmetried it, it wouldn't connect those edges. They would be like separate pieces. If that happens, let's say you're on an earlier version, you would use a, whoops, wrong one. You would use a connect, and that would actually connect those points together. We'll also see that I get all these points kind of hanging out here. That's just another fun thing that Cinema likes to do. I'm just going to grab everything, right click, and say optimize. There we go. So now everything is cleaned up. Okay. So let's start here. So I want to grab this and pull that up. Okay, so that's going to be where my propeller is going to sit. So maybe it'll even be a little bit higher than that. No, maybe right there. Okay, so I just grabbed all the points all the way around, and there's where my propeller is going to sit. I do want a seam going down the middle of this, so I'm going to use my knife loop tool and just do a little edge there and a little edge right there. Okay, so that gives me basically just a little opening for me to go through and extrude inward. I don't need this edge anymore, so I can right click and dissolve it. And then I can grab all the faces all the way around and then just do an extrude inward. Now, because of one of my options I had set earlier, you'll see those little faces here. I want to make sure that I preserve groups so that all those faces are not there. Okay, so now it's going to look like we have a seam here, so it's going to look like it's actually made of something plasticky. Where this is going to be duplicated, there's a little face there, so that has to be deleted. There's also one on this side, so that one will also be deleted. And then I can just drop this back into my other symmetries. Okay. And then this is where I can see where there's issues. So right now I can definitely see something's going on here. I need to fix that. So let me turn the smooth off. Maybe I'll just turn the smooth on. No, that's fine. Let me go to the top view and take a look. Usually what happens when you join these two sides together, yep, there's just a little bit of an overlap. You can see how they're not perfectly lined up. So I just need to grab the points and just scoot it over until they're lined up. Maybe turn my snap back on. And I'm just using my Shift S to turn my snap on and off. There we go. Okay, so that's nice and smooth. Now I symmetry it again the other way. I look at it on the other side. I'm going to have the same issue. And again, I just kind of line it up and then subdivide. So now it should be nice and smooth right at that crease. Yep. Now it looks a little bit round. I'll put a bevel in later. I'm not going to put that in yet, but a bevel will go in later. All right, that's good. Looking at these, maybe that needs to be a little bit fatter. So let me go grab this. Just going to pull that down a little bit more just so it feels like it has, again, some more room. That's good. And then right here, I'm going to do an extrude inner. And then extrude down. And that's just going to be where the motor is going to sit. Now, as you're following this, don't worry too much about where am I clicking, where am I doing this. Just look at the shapes that I'm creating and how I'm creating them. That's what you should focus on. All right, so that's nice. That's a nice little pocket that the motor would then sit in. Okay. Just for design purposes, I think I'm also going to grab these and do an extrude inner. Pull it down a bit. And then do a regular extrude. And then scale it in. So I think that might be kind of cool to have these little knobs on it. And have some legs. Alright, that should be good. Alright, now what I'm going to do is just throw in some bevels on here. Before I do any beveling, I like to duplicate my surface in case I need to go back before I did that. So here's my subdivision surface. I'm going to throw down a layer as backup. Turn off the visibility, turn off the rendering. I'll even lock it. And I'll drop all those other things on there. Okay, so I have a backup just in case I screw up, which happens. So I'm going to go back to my cylinder and I'm just going to start adding bevels. So anywhere that I get a hard edge, I want to add a bevel to it. Okay, so right there. Inside here, I want to add a bevel. So I'm just double clicking, double clicking. Alright, so all those spots should be good spots for bevels. Maybe even down here would be a good spot for a bevel. Okay, a little bevel, another division. Let's smooth it and see what that looks like. Alright, that looks pretty decent. See, I got some crispness here. I got some nice rounding. That's what I want. And then the last thing I'm going to do to this body is just make the body a little bit more squared off like the other one is. So I'm grabbing all those faces. I'm going to extrude this in using the extrude inner. Because of how this symmetries to the next side, I can't have this line here. It has to do something. So I'm going to delete this and then move these points over to the center. Make sure my snap is back on. There we go. Whoops. Something's gone awry there. Oops. Let's try that again. Let's go to our top view so we can actually see what we're doing. There we go. There we go. I must have had an extra face in here. Just delete that extra face. There we go. Sweet. All right. So now that's all closed up, nice and neat. I can probably get rid of these ones too. I don't need these two. And then I'm just going to do the same thing. Just close it off. Oops, come on. Alright, so now it's nice and smooth on the bottom. I have a nice amount of divisions there. And now I can go through and just grab these. And just extrude them straight up. And then hit the scale tool and then flatten it out. And then maybe I'll just adjust some of these points a bit so that they're more towards the center. Now I can see too there's a little crack that has formed somehow. Do I have faces? I do. Yep, I have some faces on the inside right there. So as I extruded it, I got some faces, so I just have to go through and delete those inside faces. And they may be difficult to see, it's just a matter of kind of going literally inside the surface and then just deleting them out. And you'll see how I switch between top view, front perspective view, just to be able to get this lined up perfectly. It makes your job a lot easier if it is. Okay, I'm also hitting Q, which is my toggle to turn the subdivision on and off. There's still one right there. It's not lined up right. There we go. And probably this one as well. Whoops. Alright, that looks pretty good for our base shape. Okay, there is a little crease right there, so somewhere I have a point that is just not connected. Now when that happens, here's a quick way that I can fix that, is just by grabbing all the points right down the middle and then scaling them together and then moving them in line. Do the same thing in the top view. Grab all the points this way, scale them that way, and then line them up. And then that should get rid of any weird bump, crease type thing I have. Yep. Nice and smooth. So my end result of just the base shape of this is that I have some areas that are nice and smooth. I have some areas that are sharp. I have some bevels in here. So that looks pretty decent for my starting point. If you get to this point and you're like, I don't like the way this looks, just delete it and make a new one. You know, this one took me 38 minutes with our discussion about it. Not terribly too long. The next one you do will go quicker. So if it took you an hour to do the first one, the next one will take maybe a half hour, and the next one will take like 15 minutes. And then it'll also be better at each stage. So don't think that just because you started it and it looks like junk at the end that you're stuck with that. You can literally just delete it and make a new one, okay? And you'll learn so much more by doing something like that. And your shape will turn out so much better. This is something that by the time we get done with this will look pretty sweet. So you want to spend time making it look pretty sweet. I may want to pinch this just a little bit more here. Eventually you can get to the point where you're just being like picky about stuff. There. So I kind of pinch that one a little bit more just to kind of emphasize that. And that. Cool. So now I should probably save this because I haven't saved anything on this one. Cool. So that's the base model for the body. Next class, remember we're not here Wednesday. Next class, I will go over the next part, which is modeling the motor and the propeller part, and then also the legs. Okay, this one will move pretty quick as far as what we're going to be doing. Some of the parts will take time, like the detail stuff, but the rest of it will go pretty quick. Cool. All right, any questions on this yet?
Oh.
Yep. All right.